My name's Greer Montclair. I'm 35, an Air Force vet, now making cybersecurity contracts from a studio apartment in Denver. The fridge hums louder than my social life, and the highlight of my week is when the neighbor's dog doesn't bark at me. But hey, I like it quiet. People think coming back from the military is the hard part. Truth is, it's the pretending after part. Pretending you're not constantly measuring exit points. Pretending you're fine around people complaining about Wi-Fi speed like it's life or death. It's exhausting. I don't talk about what I did in uniform. That's not me being humble, it's me being tired. You spend years flying supplies into combat zones, coordinating last-minute evacuations, sleeping with your boots on, then suddenly you're home, and your sister's crying because a bridesmaid bailed. So yeah, that's my sister, Sutton. 2 years older. Grew up in the same house as me, raised by the same overworked mom. Only difference? She got the soft version of everything. When I skinned my knee, I got peroxide and silence. When Sutton stubbed her toe, she got a hug and ice cream. She was always the golden one. She's creative, Mom used to say. That meant she doesn't pay her bills but looks good doing it. Sutton floated through art school, dated baristas, who played in bands and maxed out credit cards like they were scratch-offs. And me? I enlisted the day I turned 18. Not for patriotism. Not even for structure. I needed distance. And I needed someone, somewhere, to teach me how to hold the line when no one else would. The military gave me that. It also gave me back problems, a steel-trap sense of duty, and a very short fuse for bullshit, which brings us to now. Last month, Sutton got engaged to a guy named Vance Bainbridge. Vance thinks kombucha is a personality and wears a scarf indoors. His family owns an architecture firm in Seattle. Old money, big egos, polished veneers. They met on a wine-tasting trip and bonded over vintage irony. And because Sutton always lands on her feet, this wedding became a 6-figure production. Napa Valley venue, imported orchids, drone videography. I wish I were kidding. Naturally, guess who they came to for help? Greer, you're so good with logistics, Sutton said like I was still airdropping cargo into a jungle. And you're the only one we trust with the big stuff. Translation. You're the only one with decent credit and a stable job. Mom also said, this is a family celebration, honey. You want your sister to have her dream day, don't you? Here's the part that gets me. They didn't ask with malice. They asked like it was apparent. Like I existed purely to fix things. And I said yes. Of course, I did. Not because I'm a doormat. Because I'm tired. Tired of being the one who always says no. Tired of carrying the guilt they hand me like it's a party favor. So, I signed contracts. Paid deposits, smiled through cake tastings and linen samples. I was efficient. Invisible. Exactly the way they liked me. If you've ever been the dependable one who got nothing but silence back, hit the comments if this sounds familiar. Seriously. I want to know I'm not the only idiot who thought loyalty meant being last in line. And hey, if this story's already hitting a nerve, hit subscribe. You're going to want to see where this goes. Anyway, things got moving when Sutton asked me to book the venue. A restored vineyard called Alder Grove. Pricey, but effortlessly romantic, whatever that means. I wired the deposit the same day. 40 grand. No, thank you. No text. That night, I sat on my couch, eating cold leftovers and staring at an orchid centerpiece sample she had sent me. Isn't this divine? She texted. I stared at it for a long time. Plastic flowers are made to look fragile. That's Sutton in a nutshell. I didn't reply. I left the sample on the counter and walked out before I said something I'd regret. The cold air hit me like a reset button. I didn't even grab a jacket. Just walked around the block like I had somewhere to be, which I didn't. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that looks like it forgot how to rain. I liked it. Nobody tries to be cheerful when the sky's like that. I thought about Sutton. I always think about Sutton, whether I want to or not. That's the thing about siblings, especially the ones who never really grew up. You carry their weight long after they've dropped yours. When we were kids, Sutton was the kind of child who could cry on cue. I mean that literal complete tears in under 10 seconds. She once broke mom's favorite bowl and blamed it on me. I got grounded, of course. No one even questioned it. Mom said, "Greer, you're the strong one. Be the bigger person." I was 8. Sutton got away with everything because she was loud, dramatic, and beautiful. I was quiet, awkward, the tomboy. They didn't say it like an insult, but it always felt like one. Mom used to dress us in matching outfits. Sutton got pink dresses with bows. I got the same dress in navy blue, as if that made it fair. Every Christmas photo, I looked like I wandered in from someone else's family. In high school, Sutton was prom queen. I was in ROTC. She dated quarterbacks. I studied satellite maps. She failed algebra twice. I taught her before every retake. She got flowers when she passed. I got ignored. By turning 17, I'd already applied to the Air Force. I didn't even tell anyone until I got the acceptance letter. Mom cried when she found out, not out of pride, but because what will the neighbors think? Meanwhile, Sutton got a whole semester off to find herself. She moved to Portland, lived with 3 artists in a loft they couldn't afford, and returned with a nose piercing and a credit card balance higher than her GPA. But no matter what she did, Sutton was never the problem. She was just figuring it out. And I was expected to be the excellent, reliable, endlessly patient. It didn't stop after I came home. Even now, Sutton would call when her car broke down, rent was late, and her boyfriend ghosted her. Not to ask how I was. Just to dump the fire and hand me the extinguisher. And I let her because I knew how to fix things. Because I thought that's what family meant. But the older I got, the more it started to stink like a setup. Maybe the family system only worked as long as I played my part and didn't question the script. I remember one dinner about a year after I returned from overseas. Sutton was visiting, broke again, and Mom made roast chicken like a holiday. Sutton told a story about being traumatized by losing her luggage on a trip to Cabo. Everyone laughed. Then I mentioned that one of my friends from the unit lost her leg in a training accident, and the table went silent. Mom changed the subject. Sutton made a face and said, "You're always so intense." That was the moment I realized I wasn't part of their story. I was background. It was useful, a support beam no one notices until it cracks. Still, I kept showing up. Birthdays, rent help, emergency flights, always with the quiet understanding that no one would ever ask how I was doing. You don't get medals for being the reliable one. You get more responsibility. When Sutton called about the wedding, I already knew what was coming. Her voice was sugar-coated urgency. "Greer, I just know you're the only one who can pull this off." She was right. I could. And I would for now. Sometimes, the easiest way to see the whole picture is to play along just long enough to realize what you're looking at. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Color-coded, columned, ready to carry a wedding I didn't believe in. The weird thing is that part came easy. Supply chain management was my bread and butter in the service. I could plan a field deployment in a sandstorm. Booking a vineyard with enough chairs for 80 people? A joke. I had tabs for catering, floral, rentals, deposits, and deadlines. I even had backup vendors in case one bailed. Every invoice had a timestamp, and every email had a read receipt. I was treating Sutton's wedding like a covert mission. I didn't tell anyone that. But somewhere in the back of my mind, it felt familiar. That cold focus. That sensation of working under pressure for people who didn't know what it cost you. Coming back to civilian life messes with your brain in subtle ways. No one trains you for the in-between. Out there, everything was systems. Ranks, rules. You didn't get thanked, but you got results. You could measure your worth in task, completion, and survival. Here, people whine if their latte has oat milk instead of almond. The hardest thing about coming home wasn't the noise. It was quiet. The kind where no one's yelling orders, but no one's asking if you're okay either. After discharge, I moved back to Colorado to care for Mom while she recovered from surgery. It was supposed to be temporary. 6 months, max. That was 3 years ago. I got a remote job doing cybersecurity compliance. It's stable, pays well, but it's isolating. My apartment resembles a minimalist Pinterest board. One couch, one chair, zero personality. Most days, I eat lunch standing over the sink. Dinner's whatever's in the freezer. I work. I sleep. I avoid small talk. It's safer that way. Once in a while, I'd get a call from an old unit buddy, usually on the anniversary of something bad. We never say what it is. Just talk about the weather or their kid's soccer game. It might pull us back in if we say the real thing out loud. One time, my old commander Quentin Pryor called out of nowhere. He said, "Montclair, I heard you're back home." I told him, "Yeah, living the dream." He didn't laugh. He asked me if I ever missed it. I said, "Every day. Except Sundays." That was our dark joke. Sundays were when the letters came. The ones with black tape on the edges. He said, "You know, some people never really come back. They just change zip codes." Then he hung up. Classic Quentin. I think about that a lot. How easy it is to vanish without actually going anywhere. Sutton had no clue about any of this. Not because I didn't tell her, but because she never asked. She assumed my life was neat and settled, a soldier-turned-techie with no drama. And I let her believe that. It made her feel better. She got to be the chaos, and I became the solid one. Everyone wins. Sort of. The first time I met Vance Bainbridge was over FaceTime. Sutton flipped the camera around like I was supposed to be impressed by his blazer. He smiled like a dentist and said, "Thank you for helping with the logistics. Sutton says you're a total lifesaver." Then he turned back to his risotto. Later, she told me his parents Callum and Ramanau are a little traditional, which is Sutton speak for they don't like people who rent. They wanted everything upscale, elegant, intimate, controlled. She was trying to play their game. And I was the piece on the board no one looked at twice. Sutton forwarded me a vision board with champagne tones and minimalist flower arrangements. "Very Italian countryside," she wrote. I nearly laughed. "We're from Colorado Springs. The closest we got to Italy growing up was frozen pizza. But fine, I booked the venue. Alder Grove, up near Napa. Vineyard, barn, fairy lights, the whole Pinterest fever dream. I put down a deposit $40,000 from my account. No thank you call. No follow-up text. Just a PayPal request for linen napkins. I didn't complain. I didn't expect anything. The week after, I got an email from the floral vendor. The quote was higher than expected. I asked Sutton if she wanted to scale back. She said, "Greer, don't be negative. This is the happiest time of my life." That line stuck with me. Because for her, it probably was. For me, it was just another assignment. No medals. No flag. No one is watching. Just a woman in her living room, quietly ensuring everyone else got their moment. I clicked approve on another invoice and poured the rest of my coffee straight down the sink. The knock came 30 seconds later. 3 taps, too polite to be random. I opened the door, and there they were, Sutton and Mom, standing shoulder to shoulder like they'd rehearsed it. Mom wore her "let's be reasonable" face. Sutton was already smiling too wide. We were in the neighborhood. Sutton chirped like that wasn't a lie. They came in without waiting. Sutton sat on the arm of the couch like it was a throne. Mom took the chair I never offered. I didn't say anything. I just stood there because I knew if I sat down, I'd be stuck. Mom started with small talk. Sutton's wedding prep. The spa day she had booked. "She's glowing, isn't she?" Mom said. Sutton beamed like someone who believed it. Then came the shift. "So," Mom said, smoothing invisible lint off her pants, "we were talking about the final details." Here it was. Sutton leaned forward. "We're short on the venue balance, just a little, nothing crazy." "How much is not crazy?" I asked. 20, she said. I blinked. 1,000? Sutton laughed like I was being dramatic. "You know they upped the price for the full grounds. But it's worth it. It's stunning. And you're already kind of in the loop with everything, so it just makes sense to keep it streamlined." I looked at her. At Mom. Both of them nodded like this was a typical Tuesday. Like they weren't asking for more money on top of the 40 grand I'd already wired. Mom added, "We'll pay you back eventually." Or maybe take it out of that bonus you mentioned last Christmas? That bonus had been spent covering Mom's medical bills, not that anyone remembered. I said nothing. Sutton took that as a yes. She clapped her hands. Perfect, I'll forward the contract. Mom reached for my hand. You're doing a good thing, Greer. Family comes through when it counts. The phrase hit me like a slap. Family comes through as if I hadn't spent the last 10 years bailing them out of problems they built themselves. They left 10 minutes later, satisfied. I stood in the doorway long after the elevator dinged. That night, I opened my savings account and stared at the number. I could afford it. Technically. But it wouldn't leave much of a buffer. No vacation. No safety net. No real reason to say yes, other than guilt. I poured a drink. The good whiskey, not the cheap stuff. If I was going to drain my bank account, I figured I'd at least toast the occasion. The next day, I wired the money. No confirmation email. No call. Just another PayPal ping for floral upgrades. Marlo called that afternoon. She's one of the few people I still answer for. She said, "You sound flat." I told her I was tired. She said, "Of them or in general?" "Both," I said. She paused. "Why don't you stop?" "Because that's not how our family works. Because if I stopped, everything would fall apart. And part of me feared that if I didn't stay useful, I'd just disappear." Marlo didn't press. She said, "Well, don't catch the pieces when it breaks." That stuck with me. A few days later, Sutton sent me her registry link. She had the nerve to include a $900 espresso machine. I closed the tab. I didn't even roll my eyes. That's how far past annoyed I was I'd entered the quiet, numb phase. The next invoice came through right on time. I paid for it because that's what I did. Not because I believed in the wedding. Not because I loved my sister. Because no one else would, and someone had to. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the fridge hum like it might say something. No answers came, so I turned on a lamp, grabbed a pen, and added another line to the wedding spreadsheet. The audio engineer confirmed. Balance due next Friday. My name, my card, my problem. I wasn't angry, exactly. That would have required energy. What I felt was something colder. Like I'd been running a marathon I never signed up for, and halfway through, someone handed me a tuxedo and told me to cater the finish line. Planning this wedding became my second full-time job. Sutton texted daily with updates like she was managing a startup. Just confirmed the flatware. Vance wants sage green ties instead of pine. Do you think we can get a live cellist for the cocktail hour? A cellist. For an hour. Outside. In August. I said I'd check availability and added shaded tent rental to my to-do list. I didn't say no. I never said no. Somewhere deep down, I think I was waiting for someone to notice. The only one who did was my boss, Sayer Carmichael. During a slow Friday, he popped by my desk and said, "You look like someone who's been asked to babysit a burning house." I snorted. "It's my sister's wedding." He nodded. "And you're the maid of honor, wedding planner, and walking ATM. Oh. I didn't confirm, but he got it. Sayer's the kind of boss who remembers how you take your coffee but never asks about your weekend, which I respect. He once told me, "Greer, you're unnervingly competent. People like you are the ones everyone relies on, and no one thanks them." He wasn't wrong. I coordinated vendor timelines, managed contracts, and built contingency plans in case the caterer ghosted or the DJ double-booked. I kept 3 separate calendars synced to the minute. I even created emergency packets with contact lists, maps, and extra chargers. And every time I got an approved response from Sutton, it came with 0 punctuation and 0 gratitude. K, TH, X. Good. Perfect. Not even a damn emoji. Vance was even worse. He emailed me once to ask if the valet would understand luxury vehicles. I replied with a single word. Yes. Later, Sutton called and said I was being short. I wanted to say, "No, I'm being edited for content." But I didn't. Because by now, I understood my role. I wasn't the sister. I was in the ops team. The turning point came during a group tasting. Sutton invited me, which I thought was a nice gesture. When we arrived, I realized I was sitting with the caterers and clipboard while she and Ramona, her future mother-in-law, sipped wine and critiqued the table runners. Ramona said things like, "I think raw linen is too rustic," and "What if we imported a cheese wheel from Florence?" I didn't even blink. I made a note. Cheese wheel. Florence. Budget. Absurd. Afterwards, Sutton pulled me aside. "Don't be weird with Ramona," she whispered. "She's just particular." I almost laughed. Particular was what you called a cat that only drinks from one faucet. But again, I nodded. It was like I was disappearing in plain sight. The more I did, the less they saw me. I wasn't Greer anymore. I was just making sure nothing fell apart so that Sutton could shine. The florist called about the color palette change. The photographer needed to rework the shot list. The seating chart had to be rebuilt because Ramona didn't want her side mixed with ours. No or us. I stayed up late reprinting labels. And through all of it, no one ever asked if I was okay. If I needed help, if I wanted to be there. They assumed I did. Because I always was. That's what makes people like me dangerous. We don't yell, we don't threaten, we just keep receipts. And we always know who signed the contracts. I stared at the pile of printed labels and wondered how many more times I'd let myself be volunteered without a fight. A few hours later, Sutton texted, "Family dinner tonight at Mom's mandatory, be nice." I could have said no. But saying no always had consequences: follow-up calls, guilt trips, and silence stretched long enough to hurt. So I changed my shirt and drove across town with a bottle of wine I knew no one would open. Mom's house smelled like lemon cleaner and stale expectations. The table was already set. Sutton and Vance were there, all polished and glowing. Mom fussed over the roast like it was Christmas. I took the seat farthest from the chandelier. Dinner started fine. Chit-chat, fake laughs, the usual dance. Sutton talked about her wedding playlist like it was a TED Talk. Vance nodded like a man who thought charisma was genetic. Then Sutton said, "We finalized the guest list today." I looked up. She smiled, too big. "We had to trim a few people. Space stuff," she added. "But we kept your table near the back quiet corner, minimal traffic." I blinked. "Near the back?" She waved it off. "It's just logistics, you know." Mom chimed in. "It'll be more peaceful there. You won't have to deal with all the noise." I took a sip of my water. It tasted like nothing. Vance cleared his throat. "Ramona wanted a very curated experience." "Curated?" I repeated. "She's detail-oriented," Sutton said quickly. "Don't make it weird." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I was funding the wedding and being seated like an afterthought. Then came the real kicker. Mom said, "We were also thinking if the photographer needs to cut time, maybe skip the bridal prep shots with you. That way he can focus more on Sutton and the girls." The girls. As if I wasn't one. Thank God Marlo showed up 10 minutes later with a salad and a raised eyebrow. She clocked the mood instantly. I mouthed, "You're late." She mouthed back, "You're welcome." As we ate, the conversation turned toward honeymoons. Sutton gushed about Greece. Vance said, "I've booked us a villa near the cliffs." Mom clasped her hands. "Sounds magical." I kept chewing. Fork, bite, swallow. Repeat. Then Sutton laughed and said, "Greer's probably too practical for Greece. She'd rather vacation in a bunker." Everyone chuckled. Even Mom. I smiled politely. "Actually, I've been to Greece. Twice." Sutton blinked. "Wait, really?" "I flew out of Thessaloniki both times, during my second deployment." Dead silence. Vance scratched his neck. "Well, not quite the same as a villa, I guess." Marlo put down her fork. "You know, it's wild how much she's done that no one ever talks about." Sutton looked annoyed. "Greer doesn't like attention." "No," Marlo said. "She doesn't like being treated like scenery." Mom shifted in her seat. "Let's not make this a debate." I said, "It's not. It's dinner." Sutton stabbed her asparagus as it wronged her. After dessert, I helped clean up. Of course, I did. Mom handed me Tupperware with leftovers I didn't ask for. Sutton disappeared to take a call that lasted 25 minutes. Marlo stayed by my side like a one-woman security detail. As I was leaving, Mom said, "Try to be more open, Greer. Your sister has a lot on her plate." I nodded. So do I. I just don't make everyone eat from it. I got in my car and sat briefly before starting the engine. Everything in that house felt too small, too loud, too performative. I realized I'd spent my whole life walking on eggshells to keep others comfortable. Marlo texted me later. One word. Bullshit. I replied. Yeah. Then, I muted the family group chat and finally slept without grinding my teeth. In the morning, I canceled my alarm and let myself stay in bed past 7 for the first time in months. I stared at the ceiling like it owed me something. My body ached not from effort, just from carrying weight that wasn't mine. The spreadsheet, the logistics, the unspoken expectations. All of it sat in my chest like wet concrete. At 9:15, I pulled on a hoodie and drove to the other side of town. Parked in front of a small brick building with no sign, just a buzzer. I buzzed. Davenport Therapy? A calm voice said. It's Greer. The door clicked. I'd found Dr. Breyer Davenport through a referral from a vet center. She wasn't one of those soft-voiced, tell me how that makes you feel types. She was ex-military herself, Army, 10 years. That helped. Her office was small, plain, and smelled like old coffee and eucalyptus. No inspirational quotes on the wall, just a bookshelf and 2 chairs. She nodded when I walked in. You look less caffeinated than usual. I'm trying Rage instead, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Effective? Only as a pre-workout. I sat down and kicked off my shoes. We didn't waste time. I told her about the dinner. The seating chart. The espresso machine is on the registry. The way everyone treated my exhaustion like background noise. She didn't interrupt. Just listened, her face doing that thing where it's neutral but engaged. When I was done, I crossed my arms. It's not that I want some grand thank you. I just want someone to see it. She said, you've trained everyone to believe you don't need acknowledgement. I blinked. That's not fair. No, she said. But it's true. I hated how right she was. We sat silently for a second, and then she said, let me ask you something. If you stopped doing everything right now, what would happen? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Exactly, she said. That hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, I knew the answer. The wedding would fall apart. The family would flail. Sutton would cry, and Mom would call me selfish. And part of me was scared that I'd have nothing left without their needs. Breyer leaned forward. Greer. People like you competent, quiet, dependable, you become infrastructure. Invisible unless you break. I swallowed. You want to be seen? She asked. Break something. That sat with me all the way home. I didn't blast music. Didn't stop for lunch. Just drove in silence and let the idea rattle around. Break something. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But I did start to shift. I went for a walk without my phone. I turned down a last-minute florist emergency call. I let the linen vendor leave a voicemail and didn't call back until the next morning. Small rebellions. A few days later, I got a call from Commander Pryor. He rarely spoke more than necessary. He said, you ever feel like you came back with too much patience? I said, every damn day. He chuckled. The ones who suffer the most always bend farther than they should. Then he said, stop bending. You've earned the right to stand up. That was all. He hung up. I sat on the edge of my couch, phone still in hand, and stared at the to-do list taped to the fridge. It looked like someone else's life. The next day, I skipped the wedding planning call. Sutton left 3 voicemails. I didn't answer. She sent a text. You good? I replied, busy. No apology. No follow-up. Just a thumbs-up emoji. That told me everything I needed to know. Later that week, Marlo came over with tacos. We ate on the floor like we used to in college. I told her about therapy. About Pryor's call. She said, you know, The fact that you're even questioning all this? That's the bravest thing you've done. I looked at her. I've jumped out of planes. Exactly, she said. This is scarier. She wasn't wrong. We talked until midnight. No wedding talk, no family drama, just life. Real life. Mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel I had to earn the right to speak. I woke up the next morning and didn't check my phone immediately. That felt like progress. When I finally did, I had 11 texts from Sutton, 2 from Mom, 1 from the caterer, and a Google Calendar alert titled, "Wedding Rehearsal Final Check," in mandatory. All caps. Always classy. I dressed, drank cold coffee straight from the pot, and drove to Alder Grove. The vineyard looked like it had been ripped from a wedding magazine. Rows of trimmed vines, white chairs already set in perfect lines, and a floral arch that probably cost more than my first car. Sutton greeted me like a guest, not someone who paid for half of it. "You're late," she said. I wasn't aware I was on the clock. She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Just make sure the sound guy doesn't screw up the walk-in music. Ramona is particular." Right. Particular. I found the sound guy, confirmed the playlist, and spent the next hour doing things no one noticed. Fixing a broken mic stand. Calming down a bridesmaid who lost an earring. Reprinting a mislabeled place card. Always just out of frame, always handling the background noise. By the time the rehearsal ended, I'd sweat through my shirt. Nobody asked if I wanted a drink. Nobody thanked me. Sutton floated past with a glass of Prosecco and said, "Can you take these candles back to the Airbnb? We don't want them to melt overnight." Of course I could. I loaded them into my car and drove to the rental house they were using for bridal prep. The whole place smelled like hairspray and perfume samples. Sutton's friends were lounging in robes, laughing about something on Instagram. I dropped the candles on the kitchen counter and was about to leave when one of them said, "Sutton, your sister's actually really good at this. You should hire her full-time." Everyone laughed like it was a joke. Even Sutton. "She's not my wedding planner," she said. "She's just good at helping." Not my wedding planner. Just good at helping. I didn't say anything. I just walked out and closed the door behind me as softly as possible. On the drive home, I turned off the music. I needed silence more than rhythm. Back in my apartment, I peeled off my shoes and stared at the wall for 10 minutes. My phone buzzed 3 times. I didn't look. My body felt like a machine with no off switch functioning but not alive. I microwaved something I didn't taste and sat on the couch with my legs tucked under me like a kid. I opened my laptop, glanced at the final checklist, and closed it again. Not tonight. It was almost midnight when Marlo called. "You home?" "Yeah." "That war. Want me to come over?" "No, I'm fine." She paused. "That's a lie." "Yeah." We didn't say anything else for a while. Then she asked, "You sure you're okay doing this tomorrow?" "I've done harder things." "That's not the same." I knew she was right, but I didn't have the energy for that conversation. We hung up, and I poured myself a whiskey. The good kind, again. I stood by the window, drink in hand, looking out at the quiet street. No ceremony, no spotlight. No one clapping. Just me. The woman who made everything work. The woman no one bothered to see. By morning, the ache behind my eyes had settled into something sharper like focus, but colder. I showered, dressed in all black, not for drama, just practicality, and drove to the venue early. The sky was clean and too blue, like the universe had no idea what kind of day it was about to be. Vendors were buzzing around like bees on espresso. I nodded at the sound tech, checked the battery backups, confirmed the power distribution, and signed off on the floral truck's arrival. All smooth, all handled. By me. Sutton hadn't arrived yet. Neither had Ramona. Just bridesmaids in matching button-downs, squealing over hair schedules and mimosas. I stayed out of the way. Around 10:30, I slipped into the main hall to double-check the placement of the ceremony programs. That's when I heard it. 2 voices. Sutton and one of her friends, maybe Rachel, the tall one. I was behind the partition wall. They didn't know I was there. Rachel laughed. You are so lucky. I can't believe how much she's paid for. Sutton said, right? She's basically a walking bank account. They both laughed again. Sharp, clear, careless. Then Sutton added, she's just a wallet with legs at this point. My heart didn't drop. My stomach didn't turn. It was worse than that. I felt nothing. Like my body had heard everything it needed to hear and decided to go still. Calm. Operational. Like switching to mission mode. I stepped away from the partition, slow and silent, like clearing a perimeter. I walked out of the hall. Nobody noticed. Outside, the sunlight felt offensive. I put on my sunglasses and sat in my car with an open door. She's just a wallet with legs. It repeated like a broadcast. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't text Marlo or call Briar or write a long note to self on my phone. I just breathed and decided. 20 minutes later, I was back at my apartment. I opened my laptop, logged into every vendor portal, and shut it down methodically. Tent rental, canceled. DJ, canceled. Transport, canceled. Catering, pending called them directly and told them not to load the trucks until full payment cleared. And that payment wasn't coming from me. I saved the floral cancellation for last. Sutton loved that florist. She'd followed them since college, dreaming about their work. Click. Gone. Then I called the venue. Asked for accounting. Gave my name, my card number, and my authorization code. I need to cancel final payment. The woman paused. Ma'am, are you sure? Yes, I said. I'm sure. There was a silence, then the soft tap of keys. It's done. I sat back, closed the laptop, and exhaled for the first time in a year. The house was quiet. Peaceful. I didn't feel powerful. Or vindicated. I felt awake. Like I'd been underwater for months and just now came up for air. I stood up, stretched my arms like shedding old skin, and cleaned the kitchen with the calm you earn after a storm. One plate. One glass. Wipe the counter. Empty the trash. I moved slowly, deliberately, like I was resetting my life in increments. At 1:43 p.m., my phone rang. Sutton. I let it go. Then again. Again. Then Vance. Then Mom. I silenced the ringer and turned the phone face down. The first voicemail came in at 2:06 p.m. Sutton's voice was high and frantic. Greer, the venue just called. They said the final payment didn't go through. Can you what's going on? We need that cleared like now. I deleted it without listening to the end. Then a text. Tell me you didn't cancel the flowers. Then another. Are you seriously doing this the day of? I didn't reply. I made myself a sandwich instead. Simple, dry, satisfying. Like peace on toast. At 2:45, Mom showed up at my door. No call, no knock, just opened the storm door and banged twice like she owned the lease. I opened it slowly. She stood there in pearls and panic. You need to fix this, she said. Not my wedding, I answered. You made a commitment. No, I said. I made payments. There's a difference. She stepped inside without asking. Ramona is furious. Vance's parents are threatening to call off the ceremony. Do you know how embarrassing this is? I crossed my arms. Not as embarrassing as being called a wallet with legs. Her face froze. I watched the knowledge land like a punch she didn't expect. She said that? Loud enough. Mom sat on the arm of my couch like her knees couldn't hold the weight anymore. She didn't mean. She meant it. Silence. Long. Heavy. She looked at me then, really looked, and said something rare. You look tired. I am. You should have told me. You should have seen it. I walked to the door and opened it. She stood up slowly like she wanted to say something else. But I didn't give her the room. Lock it behind you. She left. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I stood there, door closed, breathing in my house, finally free of other people's noise. The texts kept coming. From every direction. Some angry, some desperate. One from Sutton just said, "You are ruining my life." I smiled a little. By 5 p.m., I poured myself a drink and watched the sun shift across the floor. The silence felt earned. At 5:38, Marlo texted, "I'm outside. Not leaving. Open up." I did. She walked in like she already knew. Looked around. Saw the phone face down. The laptop closed. "Done?" she asked. "Done." She let out a low whistle. "It's gonna be a bloodbath." I nodded. Good thing I'm trained for combat. We sat in silence, sipping bourbon like it was a national holiday. No music, no ceremony. Just two women and a decision that couldn't be walked back. And I didn't want to. I woke up to 37 missed calls and a silence in my chest that felt suspiciously like relief. I rolled out of bed without checking my voicemail. Brushed my teeth. Brewed coffee. Saturday on the porch while the skies still wore that soft early morning gray. At 8:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. One name, Luke. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, a text popped up. "They're freaking out. The venue locked the gates. Cops came. You need to call someone." I didn't. Instead, I took a long sip of black coffee and watched a squirrel dig something up from my yard like it had bigger priorities than family drama. Another text. "Sutton's crying in her dress. Ramona's threatening to sue. This is insane." Insane, yes. But not surprising. I finished my coffee and did the dishes. Then I walked into my living room, opened the windows, and let in the breeze. The day was too lovely for panic. By 9 o'clock, my voicemail was full. I powered off my phone. At 10:37 a.m., someone knocked on the door. Hard. It was Vance. Red-faced, shirt wrinkled, tie loose like he'd put it on quickly. "You can't just do this," he said the second I opened the door. I leaned on the frame. Already did. He looked like he didn't know where to start, anger, desperation, and confusion all competing for his mouth. "You embarrassed her. You embarrassed all of us. Do you know what this has done to our families?" I crossed my arms. "Do you know what she called me?" He hesitated. "What?" "A wallet with legs." His eyes darted. "She didn't mean." "She did." He looked down at the porch. We had to move the whole thing, chairs, flowers, food, everything, to her uncle's backyard. "Ramona says it looks like a barbecue, not a wedding." I said, "Maybe now it fits the price point." His jaw clenched. "You didn't have to do this today." "No," I said. "I could have done it weeks ago, but I still had hope." That stunned him into silence. He opened his mouth like he had something noble to say, then shut it. He walked off the porch without another word. I closed the door, locked it, and watered my plants. Around noon, I turned my phone back on. 92 messages. The first 20 were a mix of pleading and passive aggression. The rest were just noise. One stuck out. From Sutton. "You're dead to me." I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it. Later that day, Marlo came over with groceries and beer. She dropped the bag on my counter and said, "So, it's officially over." I nodded. "Was it ever really happening?" She smiled. "Oh, it was happening. It just wasn't real." We made sandwiches, sat on the floor again, and watched reruns of a bad baking show. The house smelled like toasted bread and relief. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel righteous. I felt done. Done. Like the kind of done where the air feels different. Lighter. Marlo toasted her beer against mine and said, "To tactical retreats." I clinked her bottle. And strategic exits. Outside, a neighbor mowed their lawn. Kids laughed somewhere down the block. Life went on. And I let it. I left the dishes in the sink and walked without telling anyone where I was going. The streets were quiet. Not peaceful quiet, just the kind of stillness that happens when you finally step outside your nose. I walked past houses I didn't recognize, stopped at a gas station for a bad coffee, and kept moving until my legs got tired before my brain did. When I got home, a thick envelope was wedged in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in Sutton's handwriting. Inside, a letter. 5 pages. It started with, "I don't even know where to begin." Classic. The first page was rage how I'd humiliated her, destroyed her perfect day, and made everyone choose sides. Page 2 was guilt. How hard she worked, how she just wanted one day to go right, how Ramona said I never really supported her. Page 3, rewrites. Maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. Maybe I didn't always say thank you. Maybe you misunderstood. Page 4, the ask. We're still short on the florist cancellation and caterer fees. I don't expect anything from you, but if there's any way. Page 5 was signed. Your sister, always. That. I folded it once, slowly, and slid it back into the envelope. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just placed it in the drawer where I keep expired coupons and appliance warranties. Let it sit with other things that used to mean something. I didn't call her. I didn't owe her clarity. A few days later, I ran into Luke at the grocery store. He stood before the frozen pizzas like he'd never had to decide. He turned when he saw me. No smile. Hey. Long pause. He said, "She's not doing great." "She wasn't doing great before," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom's been staying with her, says she's depressed." I didn't respond. Then he added, "She thinks you went too far." I looked at him. She? He blinked. All of them. I nodded slowly. That tracks. He shifted his weight. You could have talked to her. I could have, I said. And she could have invited me. He stared at the floor. You know this changed everything, right? Yeah, I said. That was the point. We stood there in the freezer aisle like two strangers who used to share a family. Then he turned and walked away with nothing in his cart. I went home and made soup. A week later, I got an email from Ramona. Just the subject line was enough. Clarification plus resolution. I didn't open it. Just marked it unread and moved it to a folder called Noise. People think silence is passive. But silence is a choice. And I was choosing it daily now. Choosing not to answer. Choosing not to carry. Choosing not to fix what I didn't break. Marlo noticed the shift. You're less available, she said one night while we watched a dumb movie with excellent lighting. Yeah, I said. Feels good. She raised her glass. Here's to being unreachable. We clinked glasses. I slept easier that night. No phone under my pillow. No alarms or set. No ghosts. I made pancakes the next morning and didn't measure anything, just poured and stirred until it felt right. They came out a little lopsided, a little uneven. But they were mine. I sat at the kitchen table with syrup and black coffee, watching the sun cut across the counter like I hadn't done in years. I wasn't thinking about weddings or voicemails or whether someone might stop by to apologize. I was just there. Present. And for once, that was enough. Work got easier too. I stopped staying late to finish the chaos of other people. I took lunch breaks. Real ones. With food and sunshine and no emails. Robert noticed. He leaned on the edge of my desk one afternoon and said, "You seem less available." I smiled. That's the goal. He didn't press. Just nodded, like he understood more than he let on. At home, I started moving furniture around. Reclaimed the second bedroom and turned it into a space for painting, not because I'm good at it, but because it felt like a thing people do when they aren't constantly rescuing others. I bought new sheets. Burned old journals. Cut my hair short. Small revolutions. One night, Marlo brought wine and a stack of magazines. Vision board night, she said, dumping them on my coffee table. I raised an eyebrow. What are we, 13? Exactly. That. We sat on the floor cutting out pictures of beaches, blank passports, messy bookshelves, and older women laughing around bonfires. Is it weird I don't want to forgive them? I asked, gluing down a photo of an empty cabin in the woods. Nope, she said. They think I've changed. You have. I mean in a bad way. They're wrong. We clinked wine glasses and got glue all over my rug. It felt like progress. Sometime around week 5, Sutton emailed again. No subject line, just, Please read this. I didn't delete it. But I didn't open it either. That was the shift. I didn't need closure. I didn't need to be right. I didn't need her to understand. I just needed distance. It took a long time to realize loyalty wasn't supposed to feel like erosion. That love doesn't mean hollowing yourself out to make space for someone else's comfort. People throw around the word family like it's unbreakable. But blood isn't proof of care. And forgiveness doesn't mean access. I still saw Luke sometimes. At the store. At the park. He always looked like he wanted to say something but never did. That was fine. We didn't owe each other more than silence. One Sunday, I ran into our old neighbor, Lorraine. She used to babysit us when we were kids. She asked how Sutton's wedding went. I smiled and said, didn't. She raised her eyebrows but didn't ask. Later that night, I stood in the shower, letting hot water hit the back of my neck like pressure washing old expectations off my skin. I used to think strength looked like endurance. Now I know it looks like saying no. Like not showing up. Like canceling contracts, letting phones ring out, and eating pancakes without guilt. Loyalty, I've learned, isn't about who you bleed for. It's about who shows up without needing you to. That list got shorter, but clearer. And somehow, that made it feel more like home. I archived the email without reading it and opened a blank document instead to see what it felt like to write without explaining myself. Turns out, it felt clean. Uncluttered. Like stretching your legs after being crammed in the backseat of someone else's story for too long. I didn't write a memoir. Didn't even put my name on it. Just let words fall where they wanted. No agenda, no apology. Then, I closed the laptop and made a sandwich. A few days later, I got another package. No return label, just Sutton's name in the corner. Inside, a framed photo of us as kids. Beach day, 1997. Both of us in matching swimsuits, laughing at something off camera. Taped to the back was a note. You were always the strong one. I'm sorry it took this long to see it. I stared at it for a while. Then I took the frame, removed the photo, folded the note, and placed it in the same drawer with the old wedding letter. I returned the empty frame to the box and tossed it in the trash. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pettiness. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you finally realize a sorry that arrives after the collapse isn't a repair, it's a report. And I wasn't reading reports anymore. I pulled my old army duffel out of the hall closet one night, Saturday on the floor with it like an old friend. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. Photos, a compass, discharge papers, a set of fatigues that still smelled like red dust and cheap soap. There was a time when I thought loyalty meant dying on the hill. Now, I think it means knowing when to come down. That bag didn't go back into the closet. I left it out. Open. Maybe I wasn't done being a soldier just serving the wrong war. On Sunday, I took myself out to breakfast. Alone, no book, no phone. Just me and pancakes and a booth by the window. The waitress asked, expecting anyone? I smiled. Nope, just me. She grinned. Best kind of company. Halfway through my coffee, an email pinged on my watch. The final one is from Sutton. Subject line, this is it. I finished my bite, then tapped it open. It was long. Winding. Sentimental in places, passive in others. She said she'd started therapy. She understood more now. Maybe she'd never get it right, but she was trying. At the end, one line stuck out. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I sat with that line for a while. Then I stood up, left a good tip, and entered the sun. At home, I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to Marlo or call Luke to tell him. I just highlighted the whole email. I deleted it. Then I emptied the trash. It wasn't dramatic. No music. No thunderclap. Just silence. Full and clean. Later that afternoon, I repacked the duffel. Tighter this time, deliberate. Then I walked it down to the Veterans Center and handed it off to a woman named Teresa, who ran wilderness retreats for retired servicewomen. She said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah." She looked at me like she understood something bigger than words. "Thank you for your service." I nodded. I'm finally taking it back. On the walk home, the air felt new. Or maybe I just did. My last mission wasn't overseas. It wasn't on paper. It wasn't a ceremony or a cancellation. It was this: learning how to walk away with both hands empty and still feel full. I didn't post about any of it. Didn't need a quote, a caption, or a lesson wrapped in ribbon. Some things don't need a spotlight. Some stories are better off lived quietly. So, if anyone ever asks where I was the day my sister got married, tell them I was exactly where I needed to be. Present, undisguised. And finally, mine. If stories like this hit a little too close to home, where family loyalty comes with a price tag and silence is the loudest move you've got, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more real, ruthless revenge stories and quiet family dramas that don't end with a hug.